The moment I realized my own name had been erased from my family's future plan came at a Christmas dinner I wasn't even supposed to attend. I'm Claire Holloway. I'm 31 years old. And 3 days before that dinner, my mother told me, very calmly, that my presence would complicate the mood. Those were her exact words, not unwanted, not uninvited, just inconvenient. I went anyway. I didn't announce myself. I didn't argue. I didn't demand a seat at the table. I just showed up. Because after a year of being quietly excluded from birthdays, phone calls, and decisions that directly affected my life, I needed to see it with my own eyes. I needed to know whether I was imagining it, or whether my family had already decided who I was without telling me. That night answered everything. The house looked the same from the outside. White colonial, manicured hedges, wreath perfectly centered on the front door. My parents' place had always been staged like a magazine spread. Warm, successful, stable. The kind of home people assumed produced happy children. Inside, the smell of rosemary and butter filled the air. Laughter drifted from the dining room. Real laughter. The kind I hadn't heard directed at me in years. My younger brother, Ethan, spotted me first. He froze, mid-sip of wine, his eyes flicking past me toward the kitchen, like he was checking whether I was allowed to be there. "Claire," he said, too loudly, "you made it!" My mother appeared behind him within seconds. Carol Holloway. Perfect posture, pearl earrings, that practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes anymore. "Oh," she said. Just that. No hug, no surprise, no warmth. "You're early." Dinner was already being served. I took off my coat and hung it myself. No one offered to help. I noticed the seating arrangement immediately. Name cards, printed, curated, thought through. There was no card for me. My father, Martin Holloway, was at the head of the table, carving the roast with ceremonial seriousness. Across from him sat my sister-in-law, Julia, glowing in red, one hand resting on her stomach. Pregnant. Again. Everyone leaned toward her like gravity had shifted. "Claire," my father said without looking up, "you can sit wherever." Wherever meant the end. The corner chair they'd pulled from the den, the one without a placemat. I sat down anyway. Conversation flowed around me, not to me. Promotions, a new client at the firm, Ethan's upcoming partnership track, Julia's baby shower. My mother passed dishes over my hands without meeting my eyes. At one point, I reached for the breadbasket and realized it was already empty. No one noticed. I wasn't upset. That surprised me. I felt something colder than sadness. Clarity. I'd been here before, emotionally. This wasn't new. It was just finally obvious. Halfway through dinner, my father cleared his throat. "We wanted to share some news," he said, setting his knife down. The room leaned in. This was their favorite ritual. Announcements. Controlled revelations. Julia smiled. Ethan squeezed her hand. My mother glanced at me. Just once. A flicker of something passed over her face. Not guilt. Calculation. "As you all know," my father continued, "we've been reviewing the estate planning this year. Updating things. Simplifying." My fork paused midair. Estate planning. No one had mentioned this to me. Not once. "With the business growing," he went on, "and with grandchildren in mind, it made sense to streamline." My mother nodded. "We finalized the will." There it was. I looked down at my plate. My appetite vanished, replaced by a familiar tightness in my chest. Not panic. Recognition. Ethan smiled politely, like this was a formality. Like he already knew. "We've decided," my father said, "to transfer majority ownership of the lake property and the commercial units into Ethan's name. Effective immediately." Silence. Then applause. Actual applause. Julia let out a happy breath. My mother reached for her wine. I waited. I don't know what for. Maybe for someone to say my name. Maybe for a pause, a clarification. None came. "And Claire," my mother added, finally turning to me, "you'll understand. You've always been so independent." Independent. That word again. The one they used like a compliment and a dismissal at the same time. I nodded slowly. Of course. No one asked if I was okay. No one explained what streamline meant for me. No one mentioned the years I'd helped manage those same properties when my father was sick. The unpaid weekends, the leases I negotiated, the tenants who still called me, not Ethan, when something broke. The truth settled in quietly. I hadn't been forgotten. I'd been removed. Dinner resumed like nothing had happened. My mother asked Julia about nursery colors. My father discussed tax advantages. Ethan avoided my eyes. I sat there, listening, observing. The pattern was suddenly so clear it was almost insulting I hadn't seen it sooner. This wasn't love. It was control. Affection when I complied. Silence when I didn't. Praise when I stayed useful. Exclusion when I stopped fitting the role. I finished my wine and stood up. "I'm going to head out," I said. My mother frowned. "Already?" "Yes." No one argued. No one followed me. At the door, my father called out, "Claire!" I turned. "You know this doesn't change anything between us," he said. I almost laughed. It changed everything. I drove home through quiet streets, Christmas lights blurring at the edges of my vision. My hands were steady on the wheel. My mind wasn't racing. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't trying to figure out how to fix it. I was figuring out what they'd underestimated. They thought independence meant I didn't need anything. They were about to learn what it really meant. And they had no idea that the documents they'd signed that morning were about to become very relevant to me. I just hadn't told them yet. The morning after Christmas dinner, I woke up without the familiar weight in my chest. That alone told me something had shifted. Usually after family gatherings, I replayed conversations, wondered if I'd been too quiet, too sharp, not accommodating enough. I'd draft imaginary explanations in my head, rehearsing how I might clarify myself next time, how I might smooth things over. This time, there was nothing to smooth. They'd been clear. I made coffee, black, and sat at my kitchen table, staring at the stack of unopened mail I'd been ignoring for weeks. Bills, junk. One envelope stood out, thick, cream-colored. My name typed neatly across the front. Holloway Property Management. I frowned. That company was technically my father's. Or rather, it used to be. Over the years, it had morphed into something murkier. A family business in name. In practice, I'd been the one handling day-to-day operations since my late 20s. Tenant disputes, vendor contracts, insurance renewals. All the unglamorous work that kept the assets profitable. I opened the envelope. Inside was a notice. Formal, polite, chilling. Effective immediately, my services were no longer required. No explanation, no acknowledgement of my role. Just a final paycheck calculation and instructions to return any company property. I read it twice. So this was the follow-up. The will wasn't the end. It was the beginning. They hadn't just excluded me from the future. They were erasing my present. I didn't call my parents. I didn't text Ethan. I didn't ask for clarification. Instead, I opened my laptop. There are moments in life where emotion clouds judgment. And then there are moments where emotion sharpens it. This was the second kind. I pulled up old files, leases I'd drafted, emails I'd saved, contracts sent directly to me because my father didn't want to deal with the details. Years of digital fingerprints that told a very different story than the one my family liked to present. I wasn't naive. I knew family drama rarely stayed just emotional. There was always a paper trail. Money, power, control. And I'd been sitting at the center of it longer than they realized. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "We should talk. You seemed upset last night." I didn't respond. Instead, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in over a year. "Rachel Levin," she answered. Her voice was the same. Calm, precise, a lawyer's voice. "It's Claire Holloway," I said. There was a brief pause, then warmth. "Claire, I was wondering when you'd call." That alone told me she already knew something was wrong. Rachel and I had met years earlier when she handled a zoning dispute for one of our commercial properties. She'd noticed immediately that I was the one making decisions, not my father. We'd stayed in touch loosely. Coffee once or twice. Nothing formal. Until now. "I think my family just cut me out of the business," I said. "And the will." Another pause. Longer this time. "Do you want comfort?" she asked. Or do you want strategy?
Strategy.
Good, she said. Come by my office. Bring everything. By noon, I was downtown, sitting across from Rachel in a glass-walled conference room that smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and ambition. I laid out the documents, the termination letter, the emails, the contracts with my name on them. She didn't interrupt, just read, took notes. After 20 minutes, she leaned back. Your parents made a mistake, she said. I raised an eyebrow. They treated you like family, she continued, when it benefited them. But the law doesn't care about family narratives. It cares about roles, responsibilities, and reliance. She slid one document toward me. This, she tapped it, shows you acted as de facto operations manager for over 4 years. And you were never formally compensated at market rate, which opens several doors. I exhaled slowly. Also, she added, there's something else. She pulled up a file on her tablet. 2 of the commercial properties you managed were refinanced last year. Yes, I said. I negotiated the terms. Did you know your name appears on the correspondence with the bank as primary contact? I frowned. That's standard. Not when paired with this, she said, turning the screen toward me. It was a signature page, my signature. On a guarantor acknowledgement, my stomach dropped. They used your credit, Rachel said calmly, your financial standing, without transferring ownership. That's not just unfair, that's actionable. I sat back. So that's what this was. They hadn't just excluded me because I was independent. They excluded me because I was inconveniently visible in places they didn't want scrutiny. My phone buzzed again. This time, Ethan. Hey, Mom's upset. You didn't have to leave like that. I showed the message to Rachel. She smiled thinly. Classic triangulation. What do I do? I asked. For now, she said. Nothing. Let them think you're hurt, confused, quiet. That I could do. But Claire, she continued, her tone sharpening, you need to decide something. What? Do you want back in? I thought about Christmas dinner. The empty chair. The word independent said like an accusation. No. Good, she said. Then we don't negotiate for inclusion. We negotiate for separation. That word settled deep. Separation. Not revenge. Not confrontation. Clean lines. Over the next hour, she outlined options. Formal demand letters. Compensation claims. Potential leverage if they tried to sell or transfer assets using documentation tied to me. You don't need to scorch the earth, she said. You just need to remind them that cutting you out doesn't mean you disappear. I left her office with a folder under my arm and something steadier than anger in my chest. Resolve. That evening, I finally replied to my mother. I'm not upset. I'm just taking time. She responded instantly. We love you. You know that. I stared at the screen. Love, I realized, wasn't the issue. Control was. And for the first time, I was stepping outside of it. What I didn't know yet was that my silence was already unsettling them, and that by the end of the week, my father would make a move that would force my hand completely. He always did when he felt power slipping. By Thursday, my father started calling, not leaving messages, just missed calls that stacked up like silent accusations. He preferred that method. It let him claim concern without actually saying anything he could be held to later. I didn't answer. Silence, I'd learned, was the one thing that unsettled him more than confrontation. He knew how to argue. He knew how to dominate a room. He didn't know how to operate without an audience. That morning, I was reviewing my finances when an alert popped up from my bank. Not unusual. What was unusual was the amount. A pending transaction. Large. Larger than anything I'd spent in years. It was labeled Holloway Property Management. My stomach tightened. I logged in immediately. The transaction was flagged, but not yet completed. A transfer from an account I was still technically authorized on. An account I hadn't touched since being released from my role. They were moving money without telling me, using access they hadn't bothered to revoke yet. I didn't call the bank. I didn't panic. I called Rachel. Your father just made a withdrawal from a joint operational account tied to my authorization, I said, right after cutting me off. She didn't sound surprised. How much? I told her. That's not casual, she said. That's a reposition. So what now? Now, she said, we document. Screenshot everything. Don't interfere. Let him finish. That feels risky. It is, she agreed. For him. An hour later, my phone rang again. This time, my mother. I let it go to voicemail. Claire, her voice said, strained but controlled. Your father is just reorganizing some things. There's no need to get lawyers involved. Let's not escalate this. I deleted the message. Escalation implies mutual aggression. This wasn't that. This was exposure. That afternoon, I drove past one of the commercial properties, the one on Westbrook Avenue. Brick exterior, modest storefronts, always stable, always profitable. A for sale sign stood out front. I pulled over. My pulse didn't spike. It slowed. He was selling. Not planning to. Not considering it. Already doing it. I sat in my car and watched a couple walk in with a realtor. They gestured, nodded, interested. My name was still tied to that property in 3 different financial systems. Rachel had been right. This wasn't personal anymore. It was procedural. I went home and pulled the final document from my folder, the guarantor acknowledgement. The one I'd signed years ago, without thinking twice because it was just a formality. I'd trusted them. Trust had been their leverage. At 6 that evening, Ethan finally showed up at my door. I hadn't told him where I lived. That meant my mother had. He stood there with that same careful expression he'd worn since childhood, the one that said he was trying not to pick a side while standing squarely on one. Can we talk? He asked. I stepped aside. He didn't sit, just paced. Dad says you're making things difficult, he began. I waited. He says the bank flagged something, that lawyers are getting involved. I folded my arms. Is that what he told you? He said you're overreacting. That this is about estate planning, not exclusion. I met his eyes. Ethan, I said quietly, did you know they were selling Westbrook? His face changed, just for a second. No, he said, too quickly. They're using my financial backing to do it, I continued. Without consent, without compensation. He swallowed. That's business, he said. It's complicated. No, I said, it's not. It's theft with better manners. He winced. You don't have to put it like that. I do, I said, because that's what it is. He rubbed his hands together. Look, Dad's under pressure. The firm's expanding. He's trying to protect the family. Which family? I asked. He didn't answer. That was answer enough. I'm not trying to hurt anyone, I said. I'm trying to protect myself. Ethan sighed. You always do this. Do what? Pull away. Go cold. I considered that. I go quiet when I realize my voice doesn't matter, I said. That's not cold. That's self-respect. He shook his head. You're going to tear this family apart. I opened the door. No, I said. I'm just not holding it together anymore. He left without another word. That night, Rachel emailed me a draft. Formal notice of financial exposure and demand for remediation. It was precise, neutral, devastating. It outlined my role, my financial ties, the risks they'd imposed on me without disclosure. It didn't accuse, it stated facts, and it requested immediate cessation of asset transfers involving my guarantor status. In legal language, calm is often more threatening than anger. Do we send it? I typed back. Her reply came instantly, tomorrow morning, certified. And one more thing. What? Once they receive this, she wrote, your father will panic. Expect a call, expect an offer. Expect a story about misunderstandings and intentions. I stared at the screen. And don't accept it, she added. Not yet. I slept better that night than I had in months. Because for the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was acting. What I didn't know was that my father, cornered and exposed, would make one final attempt to regain control. And he would do it the only way he knew how, by rewriting the story. The notice was delivered at 9:12 a.m. I know the exact time, because my father called at 9:14. I watched the phone ring until it stopped. Then it rang again and again. By the 4th call, I knew he'd received it. Not just opened it, understood it. The kind of understanding that doesn't come with outrage, but with fear. At 9:26, my mother called. I let it go to voicemail. Claire, she said, her voice tight, brittle at the edges. We need to talk immediately. This has gone too far. You've embarrassed your father. His partners are asking questions. There it was. Not concern, not confusion. Reputation. I finally answered on the next call. My father this time. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, skipping any pretense. "You've involved attorneys? Over family matters?" I didn't raise my voice. "Over financial exposure. You're twisting things." "No," I said. "I'm documenting them." A sharp exhale. Papers rustling. I imagined him in his office, door closed, jacket off, sleeves rolled up. The posture he took when he felt challenged. "You signed those documents willingly," he said. "You were part of the business." "Then why was I removed without notice?" I asked. "And why are assets being sold without my consent?" Silence. That was new. "We were going to tell you," he said finally. "When?" I asked. "After the holidays." I almost smiled. "You didn't forget," I said. "You postponed." "That's not fair. Neither is using my credit to fund a sale I don't benefit from." His voice dropped. "You're making this adversarial. You made it unilateral." Another pause. Then the pivot. "Claire," he said, softer now. "You're smart. You know how these things look on paper versus reality. We're your parents. We'd never hurt you." I closed my eyes. That line had worked my entire life. "Not today." "You already did," I said. "I'm just acknowledging it." He sighed, long and theatrical. "What do you want?" "Not an apology. Not inclusion. I want my name removed from all financial obligations tied to Holloway Property Management," I said, "and compensation for the years I managed operations without pay." "That's absurd," he snapped. "You lived rent-free for 2 years." I waited. "And you drove a company car," he added. "I paid taxes on that benefit," I said. "And the rent-free period was compensation you suggested, instead of salary, which Rachel has documented." Her name landed like a weight. "Rachel Levin?" he said sharply. "Yes." Another long silence. When he spoke again, his tone had changed. Calculating. Measured. "Let's meet," he said. "All of us. Sit down like a family. No lawyers." "No," I said. "Claire." "You've had decades of family meetings," I continued. "They never included my consent." He exhaled. "You're burning bridges." "No," I said. "I'm closing doors you kept locking from your side." That afternoon, something unexpected happened. I got an email from Julia. Subject line: "Can we talk?" I almost ignored it. Almost. But curiosity won. She suggested coffee. Neutral ground. No parents. No Ethan. I agreed. We met at a quiet cafe near the river. She arrived early, already seated, hands folded over her cup like she was bracing herself. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I'm listening," I replied. She hesitated. "I didn't know about the will. Or the sale. Ethan didn't tell me." "I believe you," I said. That surprised her. She took a breath. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest." I nodded. "Did Martin ever plan to include you? In the business? Long term?" I considered the question carefully. "I think he planned to use me," I said. "And then replace me." She flinched. "I'm asking because—" She glanced down. "Ethan signed something last night. He didn't explain it, just said it was necessary." My chest tightened. "What kind of something?" She shook her head. "I didn't see it, but he was nervous, not excited. Nervous." That was new. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. She met my eyes. "Because I'm married into this family, and I don't like what I'm seeing." I studied her face. She wasn't angling, she wasn't manipulating, she was worried. "I'm not trying to hurt Ethan," I said. "But I won't protect him from decisions he didn't question." She nodded slowly. "That's fair." When I left the cafe, I felt something shift again. The circle of silence around my father was thinning. That evening, Rachel called. "They responded," she said. "Already?" "Yes, with an offer." I closed my eyes. "Let me guess," I said. "They want me to sign a release in exchange for being removed from liability." "And a modest settlement," she added, "conditioned on confidentiality." I laughed softly. "They still think this is about money." "It's about control," Rachel agreed. "And losing it scares them." "What do you recommend?" She paused. "We counter," she said. "But before that, there's something you need to know." My stomach tightened. "The Westbrook sale?" she continued. "It's under review. The Buyers' Council flagged inconsistencies." I leaned forward. "Inconsistencies how?" "Authority," she said. "Specifically, who had the right to initiate the sale?" I felt a slow, steady calm settle over me. So, she said, Your father may have overplayed his hand. I looked out my window as the city lights came on, one by one. For years, I'd been told not to make waves, to keep things smooth, to trust that my silence would be rewarded. Now, the silence was gone, and with it, the illusion that they held all the power. What I didn't know yet was that the next move wouldn't come from my father. It would come from the one person in the family who had stayed quiet the longest, my mother. My mother waited 3 days before making her move. That was her pattern. She never reacted first. She observed, adjusted, and then entered the room when she believed emotions had cooled enough for her to reassert control. She liked to think of herself as the reasonable one, the peacemaker, the person who cleaned up after my father's messes without ever challenging him directly. At least, that's how she'd framed it my entire life. She asked to meet me on Sunday afternoon. Lunch. Just the two of us. No lawyers, no raised voices. Her words. I agreed. Not because I trusted her, but because I needed to hear what version of reality she planned to sell me next. We met at a small restaurant near the Botanical Gardens. Neutral. Public. A place where she could maintain composure. She was already seated when I arrived, posture straight, handbag placed precisely at her feet. "Claire," she said, standing to kiss my cheek. I let it happen. "You look tired," she added, sitting back down. "I'm not," I said. That unsettled her. I saw it in the slight tightening around her eyes. We ordered. She chose what she always chose. Salad, dressing on the side. Control, even in small things. For a moment, we ate in silence. Then, she spoke. "Your father is under a lot of stress," she said. "The firm, the properties. You know how much pressure he's always carried for this family." I took a sip of water. "This isn't about stress," I replied. "It's about decisions." She waved a hand gently, as if brushing away a misunderstanding. "Decisions made with everyone's best interest in mind. Not mine," I said. Her lips pressed together. "Claire, you've always wanted things your own way." There it was. I wanted agency, I said. "There's a difference." She sighed. "You were never excluded. You chose a different path. Independence has consequences." I looked. "You removed me from the business without notice," I said. "You sold assets tied to my finances. You finalized a will without telling me. That's not consequence. That's control." Her gaze hardened. "You're being dramatic," she said quietly. "This doesn't have to become ugly." That word again. Ugly. "What happened?" She hesitated. "Just a fraction. Families talk," she said. "Reputations shift. Doors close." There it was. The threat, wrapped in concern. I leaned back in my chair. "You're worried about what people will think," I said. "I'm worried about what I signed." Her eyes flicked away. That was new. "You knew," I said. Not a question. She inhaled slowly. "We trusted you." "No," I said. "You used me." Her hand tightened around her fork. "Watch your tone." I smiled. Not because it was funny, because it was familiar. "This is the tone I use when I stop protecting you," I said. She stared at me, searching for something. Guilt, weakness, the old reflex to back down. She didn't find it. "Rachel Levin sent a counter-proposal," my mother said finally. "It's excessive. It reflects risk," I said. "Mine." "You're asking for too much." "No," I said. "I'm asking for exactly what I gave." She shook her head. "This is going to damage your father." "You already did that," I said. "By letting him believe there would never be consequences." Her jaw tightened. "You don't understand marriage," she said sharply. "Sometimes you protect the family by staying quiet." "And sometimes," I replied, "you teach your children that silence is the price of belonging." The food arrived. Neither of us touched it. "I raised you better than this," she said. I met her eyes. "You raised me to comply," I said. "I taught myself to see." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out a folder. She slid it across the table. "I didn't want it to come to this," she said. Inside were documents. Copies. Old. Yellowed at the edges. "What is this?" I asked. She hesitated. "Your grandmother's trust." My heart skipped. "My mother," she continued, "left assets to be distributed at my discretion. I've been managing them for years." I flipped through the pages. Addresses. Accounts. One familiar name, Westbrook Avenue. You never told me, I said. You were young, she said. And then things got complicated. Complicated how? She looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in a long while. Your father didn't want those assets fragmented, she said. He wanted control. So we delayed. Delayed, I repeated. Her voice dropped. Until it no longer mattered. I closed the folder slowly. So the property he's selling, I said, was never fully his. Her silence was confirmation. That was the moment something in me finally settled. This wasn't just favoritism. It was manipulation layered over years, reinforced by silence and justified as family unity. You knew this would surface, I said. That's why you wanted to meet. She nodded once. I wanted to see if there was still a way to contain it. Contain me, I corrected. She didn't argue. I stood up. I'm done containing myself, I said. And I'm done protecting choices I didn't make. Her voice trembled. If you proceed with this, you may lose us. I looked at her. You already decided that was acceptable, I said. You just didn't think I'd notice. I left the folder on the table. I'll let Rachel handle the rest, I added. You should tell Dad that the truth doesn't disappear just because you managed it quietly. As I walked out, my phone buzzed. A message from Rachel. They've requested an emergency injunction hearing. They're nervous. I stepped into the cold afternoon air and felt something close to relief. The pieces were falling into place. My mother had kept secrets to preserve control. My father had moved too fast to secure it. And now, the structure they'd spent decades building was starting to crack under its own weight. What they didn't realize yet was that the next step wouldn't be about money or documents. It would be about testimony. And once spoken aloud, there would be no taking it back. The injunction hearing was scheduled for the following Wednesday. That detail alone told me how badly my father had miscalculated. He hated urgency. He built his career on control, on pacing, on never appearing reactive. An emergency filing meant he was afraid of losing the narrative, and more importantly, losing time. Time to move assets, time to clean up documents, time to make this disappear quietly. Rachel and I met the night before in her office. No small talk, just files spread across the table like pieces of a puzzle that had finally decided to reveal its picture. Your mother's disclosure changes everything, Rachel said, tapping the trust documents. This turns a financial dispute into a fiduciary one. I nodded. She knew. Yes, Rachel said. And she facilitated. That word landed hard. Facilitated. Not passive. Not unaware. Active. What happens tomorrow? I asked. Tomorrow, she said, your father will argue that you're acting out of resentment, that you're unstable, that you misunderstood your role. And you? I'll argue facts, she said. Which is why I need to ask you something. I looked at her. Are you ready to speak? She asked. Not argue, not accuse. Just state what you did, what you were told, and what you were never informed of. I thought about Christmas dinner, the empty chair, the word independent, the way my mother had slid the folder across the table like a bargaining chip. Yes, I said. I'm ready. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. No drama, no raised voices, just fluorescent lights, wood paneling, and a judge who had seen too many family implosions to be impressed by theatrics. My parents sat together on one side, perfectly composed. My father in his tailored suit. My mother, calm, hands folded, eyes forward. Ethan sat behind them. Julia wasn't there. That didn't surprise me. When I walked in, my father glanced up. For a brief second, something flickered in his eyes. Not anger, recognition. He was seeing me not as his daughter, but as a variable he hadn't controlled. The judge began with formalities. Then Rachel stood. She spoke without emotion, without embellishment. She laid out the timeline, my role in the business, the guarantor agreements, the termination without notice, the asset sale initiated without my consent. Then she did something unexpected. She paused, and finally she said, "We have reason to believe that certain assets being sold were never legally consolidated under Mr. Holloway's authority, but rather held in trust, managed by Mrs. Holloway." The judge looked up. My mother shifted slightly. My father turned toward her, confusion flashing across his face, before it hardened into something sharper. Rachel continued. "We request that all asset transfers be frozen pending review of fiduciary obligations and potential breach. The room was silent. The judge nodded slowly. "Mrs. Holloway," she said, looking directly at my mother, "is that accurate?" My mother's lawyer stood. "Your Honor," I asked Mrs. Holloway. The judge said. That was the moment. The one my mother had spent decades avoiding. Being asked directly, she hesitated, just long enough. "Yes," she said. "Some assets were originally held in trust." "Were those assets disclosed to all beneficiaries?" the judge asked. My mother didn't look at me. "No," she said. My father stiffened. "Did Mr. Holloway have authority to sell those assets unilaterally?" the judge continued. Silence. Then, quietly, I didn't feel triumph. I felt clarity. The judge leaned back. "This matter will require full accounting. All transfers are frozen, effective immediately. Further proceedings will determine liability." Gavel. Sharp. Final. My father didn't look at me as we stood. He didn't look at anyone. He gathered his papers with hands that weren't quite steady. Outside the courtroom, Ethan caught up to me. "Claire," he said, breathless, "why didn't you tell me?" I stopped walking. "Tell you what?" I asked. "That mom, that the trust, that dad. You were happy not knowing," I said. "That was your choice." He swallowed. "They're furious." "I know," I said. "They should be. What happens now?" I thought about that. "Now," I said, "the truth exists somewhere other than my memory." Rachel joined us. "Your father's counsel just requested a private meeting," she said. "No court, no judge." I laughed softly. "No," I said. He had his chance to speak when silence protected him. That night, my phone buzzed with messages I didn't open, calls I didn't answer. I sat alone in my apartment, the city humming outside, and felt something unfamiliar. Lightness. For the first time, I wasn't bracing for impact. I wasn't anticipating the next manipulation, the next rewrite. They couldn't put this back in the box. Tomorrow, the family business would start unraveling in ways no one could quietly manage. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what would come out. The fallout didn't arrive all at once. It seeped in, piece by piece, like water finding cracks in a foundation that had been pretending to be solid for years. The morning after the hearing, I woke up to 3 emails from former tenants. Not complaints, questions. Polite, confused questions about who they should be paying rent to now that the property sale had been paused. That word was already doing a lot of work. By noon, Rachel forwarded me a message from the buyer's legal team. They were withdrawing. Not temporarily, permanently. Too much uncertainty, too much exposure. The Westbrook deal was dead. At 2:17 p.m., my father's firm issued a bland internal memo about ongoing restructuring and temporary delays in asset consolidation. Language designed to calm investors without explaining anything. It didn't work. By evening, the phone started ringing again. This time, it wasn't my parents. It was people who had never bothered to call me before. "Claire," said a voice I recognized instantly. Gerald Pierce, one of my father's senior partners. "I hope you don't mind me reaching out directly." "I don't," I said. He cleared his throat. "There are questions about your role in the property division, about why certain disclosures weren't made." "I can imagine," I replied. He hesitated. "Would you be willing to clarify a few things? Off the record." I smiled, though he couldn't see it. "No," I said. "On the record only." A pause. "I thought you might say that." We ended the call politely. But the message was clear. The story my father had controlled for decades was no longer his alone. That night, Ethan came over again. He didn't knock this time. He texted first. "Can I come up? I need to talk." Against my better judgment, I said yes. He looked different, less polished, like someone who hadn't slept. "They're blaming each other," he said as soon as he sat down. "Dad says Mom withheld information. Mom says Dad moved too fast. No one's taking responsibility." "That's not new," I said. "They're scared," he admitted. I studied him. For the first time, he didn't look like the golden child. He looked like a bystander who had just realized the building was on fire. "What do you want from me?" I asked. He hesitated. "Dad wants to settle." "Of course he does." "He wants to offer you a percentage," Ethan continued. "Not ownership, just a payout, if you'll cooperate." "With what?" I asked. "With minimizing damage," he said. publicly. I leaned back. "Tell him no," I said. Ethan's shoulders sagged. "You don't understand. This could ruin him." "I understand perfectly," I replied. "He bet everything on control. That's always risky." He looked at me, searching. "Do you hate them?" I considered the question carefully. "No," I said. "I just don't protect them anymore." That distinction seemed to unsettle him more than anger would have. Before he left, he paused at the door. "Mom's not sleeping," he said quietly. I didn't respond. After he left, I sat alone, listening to the refrigerator hum, the city traffic outside. I thought about my mother, the way she'd slid that folder across the table, the way she'd admitted just enough truth to maintain leverage. I thought about my father, blindsided not by my defiance, but by my precision. And I thought about myself. For years, I'd been positioned as the difficult one, the distant one, the problem to be managed quietly. Now, the system that labeled me that way was unraveling without my intervention. 2 days later, Rachel called with an update. "The trust review uncovered something else," she said. I closed my eyes. Of course it did. "Your grandmother's trust," she continued, "was amended 8 years ago." I sat up. "Amended how?" "Your mother added a clause," Rachel said. "Conditional distribution." My pulse quickened. Conditional on what? On demonstrated involvement in the family business. I let out a slow breath. "So that's why," I said. "Yes," Rachel replied. "It created an incentive structure, one that favored the child who stayed close, Ethan, and punished the one who didn't," I said. "You," she confirmed. I stared at the wall. "So she wasn't just managing," I said. "She was shaping outcomes." "Yes," Rachel said, quietly. I thought about all the times my mother had told me I was free, that I didn't owe anyone anything, that independence was my strength. All the while, she'd been ensuring it came at a cost. "What do we do with this?" I asked. "That depends," Rachel said. "Do you want to challenge the amendment?" I thought about the courtroom, my mother's voice when she admitted the truth, the way she'd avoided my eyes. "Yes," I said, "but not for the money." Rachel waited. "I want the condition exposed," I said. "I want it on record that love was tied to compliance." There was a pause. Then, "That will be uncomfortable." "Good," I said. "It should be." That night, I received a message from Julia. "We need to talk. I found something." My chest tightened. "What did you find?" I typed back. Her reply came slowly. "A document, signed by Ethan, transferring his future interest as collateral." My hands went cold. Collateral for what? And more importantly, who had convinced him it was necessary? Julia sent the document 10 minutes later. I didn't open it right away. I stared at the notification on my phone, feeling a familiar tension settle between my shoulders. This wasn't fear. It was the sense you get right before something irreversible clicks into place. Like standing at the edge of a truth you can't unsee once you step forward. When I finally opened the file, I understood why she sounded shaken. It was a collateral assignment agreement. Dense, clinical, signed by Ethan 6 months earlier. His future interest in the family trust pledged as security for a private line of credit. My father's signature was there too. As guarantor, the date made my stomach drop. 6 months ago was right around the time my father had started pushing aggressively to consolidate assets. The same period when he'd asked me, casually, to sign just one more form to help smooth financing. I scrolled. The lender wasn't a bank. It was a private investment group I recognized immediately. One of my father's longtime clients. The kind of client who specialized in high-risk, short-term leverage. The kind that didn't forgive delays. I called Julia. She answered on the first ring. "Did you know about this?" I asked. "No," she said quickly. "I found it in a folder he left open on his laptop. He told me it was routine, that Dad needed temporary liquidity." "And you believed him?" "Yes," she admitted. "I wanted to." I closed my eyes. "So Ethan's future was collateral," I said, "and I was the financial buffer." There was silence on the other end. "What does that mean?" she asked. "It means," I said slowly, "that Dad didn't just plan to cut me out. He planned to replace my risk with Ethan's loyalty." Her voice shook. "He put our family at risk." "Yes," I said, "and he didn't tell either of us." We sat with that truth for a moment. "I'm scared," Julia said quietly. "If this collapses." "It won't collapse quietly," I said. But you need to understand something. What? This wasn't desperation, I said. It was strategy. After we hung up, I forwarded the document to Rachel. Her response came 5 minutes later. This changes leverage significantly. No kidding. The next morning, my father called again. This time, I answered. Claire, he said, his voice unusually controlled. We need to talk. I'm listening, I said. Not like this, he replied. In person. Privately. No, I said. You don't get private anymore. A pause. You've spoken to Julia, he said. I smiled. He always thought he was a step ahead. He never noticed when people stopped protecting him. Yes, I said. His tone sharpened. She had no right to involve you. She had every right, I said. You involved her husband. Another pause. Longer this time. You don't understand the pressure I was under, he said. The firm needed liquidity. Timing was critical. So you risked Ethan's future, I said. And mine. You were never at risk, he snapped. You're resilient. You always land on your feet. There it was. The justification he'd always used. Strength as permission. Ethan isn't resilient, I said. He's obedient. There's a difference. He exhaled sharply. What do you want? I thought of Rachel's question weeks earlier. Do you want back in? No, I said. I want out. Cleanly. And the collateral? He asked. That's not my problem, I said. But it will be if you keep using my silence as currency. He was quiet. You'd really let this destroy us, he said finally. I leaned against the counter, steady. No, I said. You already did. I'm just not pretending otherwise. That afternoon, Rachel and I met again. This document, she said, tapping the collateral agreement, creates exposure far beyond what the court has seen so far. Can we bring it in? I asked. Yes, she said. But I want to be clear. Once this enters the record, there's no protecting anyone. I nodded. That's the point. She studied me for a moment. You're not doing this out of revenge. No, I said. I'm doing it so it stops. She nodded once. Then here's what happens next. She outlined the strategy. File a supplemental motion, introduce the collateral agreement, demonstrate a pattern of undisclosed risk shifting, tie it back to the conditional trust amendment. This isn't just family drama anymore, she said. This is systemic manipulation. That night, Ethan called. I almost didn't answer. Almost. Claire, he said, his voice cracking. Did you know about the loan? Yes, I said. You did? His breath hitched. Dad said it was temporary, that everything would be fine once Westbrook sold. And when it didn't? I asked. Silence. He said you were overreacting, Ethan whispered. That you didn't understand how business works. I closed my eyes. Do you know why they always said that about me? I asked. Why? Because if I understood, I said, I wouldn't comply. He started to cry. I didn't mean to take anything from you, he said. I didn't even know there was something to take. I know, I said. That's why this ends now. What do I do? He asked. For once, I said gently, nothing. Let the truth stand on its own. When the call ended, I sat in the dark for a long time. The story my parents had told for decades was unraveling. Not because I fought harder, but because I stopped absorbing the damage for everyone else. Tomorrow, the court would see what I'd seen too late. A family that confused loyalty with silence. And a system that only worked as long as one person kept saying yes. I was done saying yes. The supplemental filing went in at 8:03 a.m. Rachel texted me a single sentence. It's officially on the record. I stared at my phone for a long moment, then set it face down on the table. There was nothing left to prepare. No last-minute edits, no soft landings. The truth was no longer something we carried privately. It had weight now. Consequence. By noon, the response came. Not from my father, from his firm. An email, carefully worded, sent to all senior partners. I didn't see it directly at first. Gerald Pierce forwarded it to me with a single line. Thought you should be aware. The subject read, Temporary Administrative Leave. Martin Holloway was stepping back, pending internal review. Not fired. Not yet. But the words might as well have been engraved. I felt no satisfaction. Just a quiet, inevitable sense of arrival. This was always where it was heading, once the facts were allowed to exist without correction. At 1:30, my mother showed up at my apartment. No call. No warning. I opened the door and found her standing there in a wool coat I recognized instantly. The one she wore when she needed to be taken seriously. Please, she said. Just 5 minutes. I stepped aside. She walked in slowly, taking in the space. My space. The books on the shelves, the absence of anything from their house. She sat on the edge of the couch like she didn't know where she belonged anymore. "You didn't have to do this," she said. "Yes," I replied. "I did." Her eyes filled, but the tears didn't fall. My mother had always been good at stopping things just short of mess. "You've humiliated your father," she said. "No," I said. "He humiliated himself by assuming silence was permanent." She flinched. "You don't understand what this costs," she said. "I understand exactly," I replied. "It costs the lie." She shook her head. "We protected you. You managed me," I said. "There's a difference." Her hands twisted together. "The trust condition. I never thought you'd find out." "That's the problem," I said calmly. "You planned my life around what I wouldn't know." She looked up sharply. "You were always so capable, so strong. Ethan needed structure, guidance. So I needed neglect?" I asked. She opened her mouth, then closed it. That silence told me everything. "Do you know what hurt the most?" I asked. "Not the will, not the business. The fact that you let me believe independence was a choice, when it was a penalty." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I was trying to keep the family together." "No," I said gently. "You were trying to keep control without being blamed for it." She stood abruptly. "If you continue this, there will be nothing left." I met her eyes. "There's already nothing left of what you're trying to preserve." She stared at me for a long moment, then nodded once. "Then I hope it was worth it," she said. I watched her leave without another word. That evening, Rachel called. "Your father's counsel wants mediation," she said. "Urgent." I laughed softly. "Of course they do. They're offering a full release from liability, a structured settlement, and acknowledgement of your operational role. No admission of wrongdoing." "And the trust condition?" I asked. Rachel paused. "They want it sealed." "No," I said, immediately. "That's what I told them you'd say," she replied. "So here's the alternative." I listened as she outlined it. Public record. Full accounting. Trust amendment exposed. Collateral agreement included. In exchange, I'd waive further claims. It wasn't about winning anymore. It was about ending the pattern. "Do it," I said. When I hung up, my phone buzzed again. A text from Ethan. "Dad says everything's falling apart." I stared at the words, then typed back. Number. "Everything is being seen." He didn't reply. The next morning, the judge issued a preliminary ruling. Trust amendment to be reviewed. Asset freeze extended. Collateral agreement under investigation. The words spread faster than anyone could contain. By afternoon, Julia called me, crying openly. "He never told me how bad it was," she said. "Ethan's future, our kids, all of it was leveraged." "I know," I said. "He keeps saying he was doing it for the family," she sobbed. "That's what people say," I replied quietly, "when they mean themselves." After we hung up, I went for a long walk. The air was cold, sharp. The city moved around me like nothing extraordinary was happening. And maybe it wasn't. Families broke every day. What felt extraordinary was that I wasn't trying to fix it. That night, I sat on my balcony and realized something else had changed. I wasn't waiting for an apology anymore, because even if it came, it wouldn't give me back the years I'd spent minimizing myself to make room for someone else's control. Tomorrow would bring the final hearing, and with it, the last chance for my parents to speak honestly. I suspected they wouldn't take it. The final hearing was scheduled for a Friday morning. That felt deliberate. Judges liked Fridays for endings. Decisions landed, files closed, and whatever fallout followed had the weekend to settle before anyone had to pretend things were normal again. I arrived early, not because I was nervous, but because I wanted to sit in the room before anyone else arrived. I wanted to feel what it was like, without their presence shaping the air. The courtroom was quiet. Empty benches. Soft hum of fluorescent lights. I sat in the second row, hands folded, breathing evenly. This was the last place I would ever need to explain myself to my family. When my parents walked in, they didn't sit together. That was new. My father took his place beside his attorney, shoulders stiff, jaw set. My mother sat a few seats away, hands clasped tightly in her lap, staring straight ahead like if she didn't look at anyone, no one could read her. Ethan arrived last. Alone. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, emotionally. Like the armor he'd worn his whole life had finally cracked, and he didn't know what to replace it with. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Proceedings began without ceremony. Rachel spoke first. She didn't dramatize anything. She didn't frame me as a victim or my parents as villains. She spoke in timelines, documents, signatures, omissions. Facts don't need emotion when they're strong enough. She presented the trust amendment, the conditional language, the pattern of asset consolidation, the collateral agreement signed by Ethan under incomplete disclosure. She ended with one sentence that stayed with me. "This case is not about inheritance," she said. "It is about consent." My father's attorney followed. He spoke about intentions, about family complexity, about misunderstandings and pressures and legacy. He spoke for a long time. The judge listened patiently. Then she asked one question. "Mr. Holloway," she said, turning to my father, "did you ever explicitly inform your daughter that her financial exposure would be used to secure assets she did not own?" My father stood. "No," he said. "Did you inform your son that his future interest was being pledged as collateral for a private loan?" she asked. He hesitated. "Yes," he said. "In general terms." The judge's eyes sharpened. "In general terms," she repeated, "is not a legal standard." She turned to my mother. "Mrs. Holloway," she said, "did you amend the trust to condition distribution based on involvement in the family business?" "Yes," my mother said quietly. "Did you inform all beneficiaries of that condition?" "No." The room felt very still. The judge leaned back. "For years," she said, "this family operated on selective disclosure. Authority without transparency. Control without consent." She looked directly at my parents. "That ends here." She issued her ruling calmly. The trust amendment was invalidated. All assets reverted to their original trust structure, pending redistribution. The collateral agreement was deemed improperly disclosed and unenforceable against Ethan's future interest. I was formally released from all financial obligations tied to the family business. And finally, the judge paused. "Ms. Holloway is entitled to compensation for uncompensated labor and financial risk undertaken on behalf of Holloway Property Management." She named a number. It was fair, precise, not excessive. I didn't react. Neither did my parents. When it was over, no one clapped. No one spoke. Papers were gathered. Chairs scraped softly against the floor. Outside the courtroom, my father stopped me. "Claire," he said. I turned. For the first time, he looked older. Not defeated, just exposed. "I never meant for this to happen," he said. "I know," I replied. That surprised him. "You don't," he said. "I was trying to build something." "You were," I agreed. "You just didn't think I was part of approximate count. Approximately 1,070 words. You just didn't think I was part of it," I finished. My father stared at me, his mouth slightly open, like he'd been preparing a defense and realized too late that the argument had already ended. My mother stood a few steps behind him. She didn't come closer. She didn't interrupt. That, more than anything else, told me she finally understood where she stood. "I gave you opportunities," my father said, grasping for footing. "You chose independence." "I chose honesty," I replied. "You chose control." He looked away, jaw tightening. "You've dismantled everything we worked for." I shook my head. "No. I dismantled what was built on silence." Rachel touched my arm lightly. "We should go." I nodded. As we walked down the courthouse steps, the air felt different. Not lighter, clearer. Like the pressure system had finally shifted. "Are you okay?" Rachel asked once we reached the sidewalk. "Yes," I said, surprised by how true it felt. "I'm finished." She smiled. "Then my job here is almost done." Almost. The checks came 2 weeks later. Not the money itself. The paperwork. The formal release. The accounting summaries. Clean, final, impossible to argue with. I signed them without hesitation. The compensation covered more than the unpaid labor. It covered the risk. The years of quietly absorbing responsibility without authority. It gave me something I hadn't had before. Leverage. But I didn't use it the way my parents would have expected. I didn't reinvest in anything connected to them. I didn't negotiate to stay involved. I walked away. Ethan called me that night. "They told me the trust is being restructured," he said. Equally. That's good, I replied. I don't know how to feel, he admitted. I keep thinking, if you hadn't pushed, if I hadn't stopped covering, I corrected gently. He was quiet for a moment. Julia's angry, he said. Not at you. At them. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. That's appropriate, I said. He hesitated. Do you hate me? The question caught me off guard. No, I said honestly. But I don't protect you from reality anymore. I don't want that, he said quickly. I want to earn my place. That's between you and yourself, I replied. Not me. After we hung up, I sat on my balcony and watched the city settle into evening. Lights on, windows glowing. People living their lives without knowing anything about courtrooms or trusts or carefully constructed family myths. For the first time, I felt like one of them. 3 weeks later, my mother sent a message. Just a message. No subject line, no greeting. I'm sorry for my part in this. I read it twice. I didn't reply right away, not because I wanted to punish her, but because I needed to check whether replying would reopen something I'd finally closed. In the end, I sent one sentence. I accept your apology. I won't resume the old dynamic. She didn't respond. That was answer enough. The most unexpected change came a month later. My father resigned from the firm. Not publicly dramatic, no scandal, just a quiet announcement buried in industry news. Pursuing other interests. That phrase again. Control dressed up as choice. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt finished. I took the money and did something simple with it. I paid off my mortgage. I funded a small consultancy of my own. Nothing flashy. Just enough to advise property owners who needed someone meticulous, ethical, and unafraid to ask questions others avoided. People found me quickly. Apparently, reputation travels faster than silence once the truth is allowed to speak. One afternoon, Julia stopped by my office. She looked tired, but steadier. I wanted to thank you, she said. For what? For not protecting the lie, she replied. It forced Ethan to grow up. I nodded. That was always his work to do. She hesitated. We're setting boundaries with them. Good, I said. They won't like it. She smiled faintly. We're learning. That's not our problem. After she left, I sat alone in my office and thought about the version of myself who'd sat at that Christmas table, chair pulled from the den, name missing from the card. She thought something was wrong with her. She'd been wrong. What was wrong was a system that rewarded silence and punished autonomy. A family that confused obedience with love. A narrative that only worked if one person kept agreeing to be small. I didn't win against my parents. I stepped out of their game. And that, I realized, was the only victory that ever mattered. Still, the story wasn't quite over. Because a week later, I received a letter, handwritten, from my father. And before I opened it, I already knew one thing. Whatever he was about to say, it would be the last chance I'd give him to speak to me as an equal. I didn't open my father's letter right away. I let it sit on my desk for 3 days, unopened. Like an object whose weight I already understood without needing to lift it. The envelope was plain, no letterhead, no return address. Just my name, written in his careful, disciplined handwriting. That alone told me this wasn't a legal move. It was personal. On the 4th morning, I made coffee, sat down, and opened it. Claire, I don't know how to speak to you anymore, so I'll write instead. I've replayed everything in my head, the decisions, the assumptions, the way I thought leadership meant knowing better than everyone else, especially you. I told myself you were strong, that you didn't need the same things Ethan did. I see now how convenient that belief was. I won't ask you to forgive me. I don't think that's something I get to request. I will say this. I never doubted your capability. I doubted your willingness to play the role I designed. That was my mistake. If you choose not to respond, I'll understand. If you do, I'll listen. Dad. I folded the letter and set it aside. It wasn't nothing, but it wasn't enough. For years, I'd mistaken recognition for repair. I'd believed that if my parents ever truly saw me, everything would realign, that the past would soften, that the damage would somehow undo itself. But growth doesn't work that way. Understanding doesn't erase impact. I didn't respond, not out of cruelty, out of clarity. Because the truth was, I didn't need anything more from him. Not accountability, not explanation, not even remorse. I had already taken back the only thing that mattered.
My agency.
Life settled into a rhythm after that.
Not a dramatic one, a steady one.
My consultancy grew, quietly. Referrals came in from people who valued precision and discretion. Property owners tired of being managed by ego instead of ethics. I worked reasonable hours. I slept well. I stopped bracing for the next emotional demand. Ethan and I spoke occasionally. Not often, but honestly. He'd started therapy. Julia held firm boundaries. Their kids would grow up in a different atmosphere than the one we'd known. My mother sent a holiday card that year. Simple, neutral. Signed with her name only. I put it in a drawer. On the anniversary of that Christmas dinner, I found myself back at the same restaurant, meeting a client for lunch. Different table, different posture, different version of me. As I sat there, I realized something quietly profound. I no longer needed to rehearse my story. I didn't need to justify why I'd walked away. I didn't need to explain my boundaries. I didn't need anyone's agreement for my choices to be valid. That was the real inheritance. Not money, not property, not even vindication. It was the ability to choose myself without apology. Here's what I learned, and I'll keep it brief. Family drama isn't always loud. Sometimes it's administrative. Signed quietly, explained gently, enforced through silence and obligation. The most damaging betrayal isn't always cruelty, it's manipulation, dressed as care. Allowing it to continue doesn't make you loyal, it makes you invisible. Revenge isn't always confrontation. Sometimes it's refusing to participate. It's taking your name off documents, taking your energy out of systems that depend on your compliance. Letting the people who benefited from your silence finally hear it. Boundaries aren't punishment. They're truth, enforced. I didn't destroy my family. I stopped sacrificing myself to keep it comfortable. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to know why. Have you ever been excluded, overlooked, or quietly controlled by the people who were supposed to protect you? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more stories like this one, about betrayal, inheritance, family drama, revenge, and the moment the tables turn, like, subscribe, and stay with me. Sometimes the most powerful payback is simply choosing yourself and walking away without looking back.